I'm speaking with Claudia Wells, that's W-E-L-S-S, and Claudia is part of the Global Coherence Initiative. What is the Global Coherence Initiative?
The Global Coherence Initiative is an initiative that is intending to create coherence on the planet.
What kind of coherence?
Energetic coherence in individuals, in social systems, and in natural systems.
When you say coherent, you mean that all the parts work together and not at cross purposes?
Yes. Do you know what it feels like to feel incoherent?
No, I've never had that experience.
Oh, well, many of us have.
Just
it's
joking.
not a great feeling. Coherence is the opposite of that. So if you think of incoherence as sort of a stress state, coherence is a state of equilibrium. And with the organizations that I work with, we describe it as a psychophysiological state of equilibrium, but you can think of it as a body-mind equilibrium where all of the human systems are working in harmony together.
So now you're saying that there's sort of a normal state that human beings should be in, and it's a stress-free state?
There's an optimal state. When human beings are stressed, something happens called cortical inhibition. And what that means is that the human system prepares to go into survival. And when the human system prepares to go into survival, the higher order functioning parts of the brain shut down. So it can concentrate on running or fighting. When a human system is in coherence, then something happens called cortical facilitation. And what that means is the human system comes into equilibrium and the higher order functioning of the brain lights up. And we have greater access to our creativity.
Now, some people might say that stress brings out the greatest creativity because it has to. For example, let's say you're under stress because you just got fired from your job and you have 4 children to support and you have no other useful job skills. So that stress might force you to go out and resolve that problem, whereas if everything were going well for you, you might just get lazy and not accomplish anything.
Well, the kind of stress that you're talking about is actually an adrenaline-fueled stress. And yes, a lot of us do work very well in that mode, but it's not really a sustainable mode because it pulls resources from the body that are not necessarily restored, especially when you're chronically operating at that mode, which a lot of us are. And from personal experience, many of us have experienced that being in that mode for a long time actually denies us access to a higher intelligence that we know that we have when we're in different modes.
Now, is part of the goal to get rid of the sources of stress? Because there are a lot of sources of stress that you cannot easily get rid of, certain factors in your environment that maybe you can't control. So let's say you're under stress because of things you can't control. Can you then control your stress?
Yes, you can definitely affect the level of stress by working directly with the physical systems, with the body systems, bringing them into equilibrium. And what you find when you have enough mastery at that level is that things that you think you can't influence suddenly shift. And because you have more access to the more creative, imaginative, wider perspective parts of the brain, you start to discern opportunities that you didn't when you were in that either adrenaline push or feeling completely out of control sort of stress state.
Now, what does this have to do with collective intelligence? Can people reduce their state of stress collectively? I've heard of mass panic,
yes.
But I've never heard of mass peace.
So it is the opposite of mass panic and mass stress and mass incoherence, because it's a science-based online initiative that intends to, first of all, help facilitate a critical mass of the population gaining mastery over their own coherence. It doesn't matter how they do it, whatever discipline they choose. It can be any form of meditation or whatever other practice that they have. But once they have this level of mastery and are committed to it, the point is to connect them into a community. This is where the collective part comes in. And then the change theory is that if you change the level of coherence in a human system, you can shift the level of coherence in a social system because we make up the social systems. And then by changing the level of coherence in the social systems, you may actually be able to change the level of coherence in natural systems because we are a part of this natural biological world.
Do you already have a prototypical community working that demonstrates these principles?
There are about 6,000 people that are already working on creating that level of mastery within themselves. And the next step is when there is a social system that is in need, for example, a humanitarian disaster, it would be to alert the community that we need them to go into their state of coherence, and then see if that level of coherence that they are building can affect the larger system.
Let's say you have an example of stress. For example, a hurricane hits New Orleans. So would there be a community that would spring into action and do something?
That is the idea. There are some scientific journals that have published a study that transcendental meditators have done about how their meditation has impacted violence levels in Washington, D.C. This was several years ago, and it was published in some very esteemed scientific journals. And the transcendental meditators were not meditating on peace. In other words, they were not saying, please bring violence down in Washington, D.C. They were just managing their own level of energy. And the scientific studies showed that it was, I don't remember the year, but it was in the summer, which is in Washington, D.C., the most violent time of year because of the heat and humidity, and people get really aggravated. The violence levels did come down. All indicators of violence came down significantly, significant enough that they published it in the journals.
Now, I think many people will say, I'm interested in this if it benefits me. So let's say you have a typical person who's just trying to make his life, make his living, whatever, and he says, well, what's in it for me if I get involved in this sort of thing? How will it help me?
I have two answers. One is maybe it's not for you, because the collective intelligence community that we are appealing to is the community that believes that collective intelligence has to do with an awareness of what's good for the whole. So unless you believe that one of the ultimate goals of being collectively intelligent is that everyone will benefit from the intelligence that's being produced towards creating a world that works for all, you might not be interested. But the other answer I could say is that to be part of this process, you have to become a healthier system yourself. So if you could see the benefit for yourself in being a mind-body system that has access to its highest creativity, that is in a state of equilibrium instead of stress, then you might be able to see how that could personally benefit you, even forgetting about the collective.
I think most people would like to do that. Most people would like to be more creative. They would like to be more intelligent. They would like to feel less stress. Is the technology really there or close to being there that would give that to any person? That he could read books on the subject. He could practice various disciplines. Is the one thing that is pretty much sure to work for just about anybody? We're
finding the biofeedback technologies work really well because it makes visible the processes that are happening in your body as you are engaging in particular techniques meant to put you in equilibrium. And that visual feedback we find to be a great encouragement. A lot of people like to see measurement, and so it gives them the motivation to continue to practice, and they can see when they are improving as well as feel it. And then on a collective level, the Global Coherence Initiative is building magnetometers, which are actually designed to measure changes in the ionosphere that research shows reflects changes in the human system the most sensitively. So one of the main goals of the Global Coherence Initiative is not just to build this population and to see empirically if we're having effect in social systems by watching what happens to social system indicators, but measure changes in the ionosphere to see if we can correlate that to initiatives designed to change the coherence of the field.